All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everyone. I will entertain a motion to approve today's agenda.
I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda.
All right, there's been a request to amend the agenda. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All right, no discussion needed. We'll amend the agenda under new business.
Yes.
All right, all those in favor of amending the agenda for today's meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, approval of minutes from the June 1st meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the June 1st regular meeting minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the June 6th special meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of accepting the minutes from the special meeting on June 6th, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is President's remarks. Two quick things. Number one, I just want to remind everybody that there is a meeting with the Maryland Department of Transportation regarding the roundabout, a proposed roundabout at 589. It is on July 11th at, Steve, is it 7 o'clock? 7 o'clock. So
In this room.
Yeah, and here in the Aztec room. So if anybody asks, please pass the word. We like to get some participation. There'll be question and answer. Certainly the folks there will be able to answer any questions. You can share your concerns and so on and so forth. So I really encourage everybody who can make it to please attend that meeting on the 11th. And I'll save other things for later. So that's it. Next item on the agenda, presentations. Worcester County Youth Family Counseling Services, Debbie Smullen. Debbie, welcome. Hold on. We want to make, because it's being broadcast, we want to make sure, Charlie, if you could check the microphone and make sure everything's working okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I am here. I do work for Worcester Youth and Family, and I could talk to you all day about the wonderful things that we do for the families and children of Worcester County, but I'm here this morning to talk about the Worcester Goes Purple initiative. Worcester Goes Purple is an awareness project that is set to engage the community in preventing substance abuse and promoting healthy life choices. This initiative is supported by the Worcester County Public Schools, the Worcester County Health Department, Atlantic General Hospital, and funding that has been provided from the Heroin and Opioid Policy Development Grant. This year, over 100 Maryland citizens have already lost their lives to opioid overdoses. It's important that we understand that addiction is a medical condition, and there is such a stigma involved with addictions that it does prevent people from seeking treatment, and it prevents families from getting the support that they need from friends, from the community. And addiction does not discriminate by race, gender, or social standing. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are addicted that you may not know that they are addicted, that they have an addiction. There are so many families that are suffering because they have family members who are addicted and they're afraid to talk about it. Every person who has unused prescriptions in their home, you may have had a hip replacement, you may have had a knee replacement, you have medications that you keep in your medicine cabinet and you don't think to dispose of those. Those are unfortunately things that teenagers that may come into your home, we've had realtors say that when people come in to look at homes, they may ask to use the bathroom and they'll go in the medicine cabinet and look for what prescriptions you may have in your medicine cabinet. It's not always people that want to use the prescriptions, but they will buy them to sell as well. So it's important that any old prescriptions that you have, that you go through your medicine cabinets and properly dispose of them. AGH does have a disposal right in the main lobby that you can take any prescriptions and just put them in there, and then they're properly disposed of. One of the things that I found so amazing about this program as I got into it is the people who are in recovery, you actually, it said never own recovery. Recovery is something that you have to pay rent, and it is due every single day. So people that are in recovery are definitely struggling. September is National Recovery Month, and so that is the month that we want the whole county to go purple. We do have some events planned. We have a motherhood walk with the Grace Center, which is going to be on July 20th in Berlin, and I have some brochures which I will leave. Our kickoff event is going to be at the Shorebird Stadium on August the 22nd. So we do encourage you to come out to the stadium to support the Worcester Goes Purple movement. We also have a walk for recovery that we are partnering with the Atlantic Club in West Ocean City. The walk will be down on the boardwalk, and that's going to be on September the 7th. So the things that we're asking the Ocean Pines community to do, because you are such a large, active community in Worcester County, you can really help to make a difference for this movement. So we're asking you to buy a purple light bulb, put it right outside your door, just change your light bulb for the month of September. You can decorate with lights. Purple lights are popular at Halloween, so they usually come out in August. So that'll be a perfect time for you to get set for the September time frame. You can use purple ribbons. I have brought a few yard signs that I've left over here by the door, and we certainly do have others of those, and I will also leave some business cards. Does anyone have any questions about the movement?
Questions?
No questions?
Seeing
Why-
none, Debbie, thank you very much. Please make sure you leave information for others to pick up, and if I put our GM on the spot here, if you want to get some information out to the rest of the Ocean Pines community, if you could forward it on to the GM, we can get that posted on our website and get a little bit more awareness of the program and the upcoming events associated with the program.
I do appreciate that. We do have a Facebook page as well and a website, so I would appreciate if all of you would check that out and follow our Facebook so that you would be able to learn more about the initiative.
Very good. Debbie, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the Treasurer's Report. John Viola.
Okay. Next slide. Okay, so we have a fiscal April 30th year end. We closed out that year with a positive $120,000 to budget, which means that we actually were positive income, $120,000. May is our first month. Obviously, there's a reason why we have this fiscal. The majority of our operations come, right, May, June, July, and we want to report that. So one of the reasons I'm bringing that up is when I talk about golf, we made a little reporting change, and I'll get into that so everybody's clear on it. So for the month, revenues over budget, approximately $175,000. Expenses under budget, $27,000. Net operating profit favorable, approximately $200,000. Good start. Next slide. So for the month of May, favorable $233,000, offset by unfavorable variance of $31,000, the net $202,000, which you saw from the prior slide. So the next slide will tie that all together for you, which will give you all the detail where we were favorable, thank you, where we were favorable and where we weren't. Let me just, because I can't see it. So this is the slide that puts it all together. So the favorable, Yacht Club, $67,000. Beach Club, $49,000. Rec and Parks, $31,000. I can straight down, but you can all read it. Want to point out golf ops and maintenance, favorable, $14,000. The GM office, $13,000. Marina, always favorable. Police, other. But let's go back to golf. As you know, we made a lot of changes up there. we have construction going on, and a lot of what I heard was going into that month that it would affect operations, everything we're doing. As you can see from the numbers, we're positive. So when you take into account everything that's going on up there from construction and everything, in my mind and what I'm reporting is very favorable. And I just want to make sure everybody understands that. I understood the concerns. We have done everything possible to ensure a pleasant experience for the golfers, and the feedback I'm getting in general or overall is that it's positive. The GM offer is favorable, 13,000. Obviously, the situation with me compared to where it was last year, there's some favorability there. Not sure how that would go going forward, but there is favorability there. The yacht club, it's just, last year, the May numbers were, I believe, for 2 weeks. So this year, they're in there for the full month. And last year, I know what they had to go through to get that place operational. I saw what it was 2 years ago. Compliments to Matt Ort. Beach parking, well, we always do well in beach parking. Okay, the unfavorability and is aquatics, but Colby will get into those numbers. Her and I spoke the other day. She certainly is going to get you all up to speed on it. Some of it's time, well, I'll leave it for her, but she's certainly all over it. Public relations, 4,000. Next slide. Okay, one of my favorite slides, and I think I'm going to take a minute here to recognize Gene Ringsdorf, our assistant treasurer, who will be finishing up his tenure at the end of August. He's sent an email to myself and the board, and I just want to thank Gene for all the work and service that he's given to Ocean Pines. If everybody just recognize Gene, he is staying on to the end of August. I do appreciate that. He'll certainly be missed from my end, but I certainly understand it. But Gene's done a lot of work on the reserves. We have a reserve study. There'll be updates on the reserves to reflect all construction or anything of that nature, which I will do for the next monthly meeting, and definitely for the annual report, the annual meeting. So, but you can see there, because we have the new assessments have come in, the 1.9, second line down, assessments to the replacement. So obviously the money went in from the assessments that was approved in the budget, along with the bulkheads for the 2.6. Right now, the spend hasn't really started that much for all the initiatives that I'll talk about on the GM report. But there's our balance at the end of 5/31/19, the $7 million for replacement, the bulkheads, and Colby will talk to you about bulkheads and roads. All righty, so the $7 million, that will, each month I will update you on that, and, and the spend on the construction. Next slide. Cash and short-term investments. Overall laddered investment rate of return for May approximately 2.5%. As you know, the rates that we're receiving actually at this time are very good. Rates are coming down. We've locked into some rates that have been out there that were higher. But if you follow this kind of stuff like I do, the rates are coming down. Our controller has done, in my mind, a very good job in doing the investments. At May 31st, 2019, the association had approximately $16.3 million in cash. Now keep in mind, a lot of cash came in from the assessments, but we need that money for the operations for the next fiscal year. So a lot of that money is already encumbered for the operations, but we do have it invested. So approximately $5.8 million invested in CDARS, fully FDIC insured, approximately $10.5 million in money market, earning 2% in other operating accounts, fully insured. So there are operating accounts on a monthly basis with the B&F team, myself, the controller. There is a review of the investments, what we're doing, as well as our banking. So that's a constant review with B&F, and I just want to make sure everybody understands that that's part of a procedure that's in place. Okay, that's it for the Treasury report. Next slide.
John, thank you.
Yeah, any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Okay.
Seeing none. Next item on the agenda, operations report. John and
sorry.
Colby. Thank you.
No, actually, it's the gym first. There you go. Thank you. Okay, let's just take a second and let's look at this slide, because there's a lot going on there. And I just want to make sure everybody understands where we are as far as initiatives, projects, and just normal operations, what I call the initiatives part. Colby will get into the operations of the day-to-day. We have the North Star project, and I also want to, before I even get into it, I want to say to everybody, as of now, everything's on track. It's a team effort. I've put together work groups with volunteers, experts in the field, depending on what the project or what I call them initiatives are. And without those work groups and without the team effort of the Ocean Pines team, I don't think we can get this done. But we are getting it done, and we're on track. Everybody's operating on all cylinders. Also, in my mind, or my opinion, there's no Taj Mahals here based upon what the board has approved. So the North Star project, that alone would normally be an initiative for a year for a team, and certainly at the end would be an accomplishment. We're on track for the North Star. There are some things that need to be fine-tuned that I'll address this week with the team. But there's a lot going on here. Normally at this time, I got to be honest with you, usually these type of initiatives are on track. There'll come a time in the next couple of months, but what I'm seeing and hearing is all positive stuff. Clubhouse. Again, any one of these would be an initiative for 1 year. So the clubhouse right now, as you know, it's been demolished. We're looking at the foundation. We had extra time for that. There's definitely, in my opinion, was the right thing to do in the sense of all the study and input that we're receiving from the experts on the foundation. We're moving ahead. Everything's been on track so far. The spend, there certainly are checks and balances in there so that it's not one person making decisions. And I have a lot of expertise from individuals that are on that work group. Police building on track. Probably see something in the next month or two in more detail. I know Josh will work with me to put out a communication on all of this. We certainly are communicating all the initiatives, and Josh is doing a fabulous job. The cart barn probably will come in under the budget that is in there, but we'll know more within the next month. But I like what I'm seeing on that. The Matterhorn contract, we have a work group for that. We're certainly working diligent on that. We want to get it done as soon as possible. I believe that's the sentiments of the board and everybody else. Compensation study, I think you'll hear more about that today. As I mentioned, a lot of this could not be done without the team stepping up. Michelle certainly has. She's taken that on as a lead for me, helping me do a lot there, as well as everybody else on that work group. There was a very positive meeting the other day. I believe you're going to hear more from Colette, I believe it is today, Director Colette. But, you know, with everything on our agenda, I do believe we can fit it in if that's what the board dictates me to do. Craft building contract signed. Debbie Donahue, I believe we're going to have some things starting in July. The crabbing pier, mid-July, Nobi. What that is obviously we've signed a contract with Fish and Marine to take down the pier. Guest Wi-Fi at Yacht Club. Steve's working on that. I've gotten a lot of emails on why we don't have Wi-Fi there. I think that's going to be very positive. Golf course. You all see what the condition that golf course is in. Andre Jordan has done a fabulous job, him and his team. The positive input or feedback I received from the golfers as well as the outside play golfers has been very positive, and that's definitely something we'll look at going forward as we review pricing and among other things for the golf course. John Malinowski and his team also. I just want to make sure I'm recognizing everybody here and all the work they're doing. White House Park, Debbie, as you can see it, I pass by it every day. There are many, many people there. Definitely Ocean Pines is enjoying it. Colby will talk more about that. The annual audit. Let's not forget Steve Phillips, our controller, and how much is going on back there right now. Finished the forensic audit. He's got an annual audit going on. It's basically wrapped up. It's positive. I didn't hear anything that I needed to be concerned about. I've met with the auditors. Geraldine has done a lot of work there. Keep in mind, too, Steve, he's basically reconfiguring that department. We have at least 2 open positions that he's working on filling during the busiest time. I've been in there. I understand what he's going through, and I believe he's doing a terrific job. Him and I definitely have the same vision for it. Bulkheads, dredging, and drainage. Colby will get into more with that. Obviously, you all know she was tasked with that when I first came in, and her and the team, I believe, are approaching it and doing a terrific job. Next slide.
Good morning, everybody. To touch base on public works and drainage, we did get a bid back for the Watertown Road pipe replacement. We're going to see if we can seek a couple more before we present that to the general manager. The Boston Road pipe has been completed. While we have the dry weather right now, this is the best time to get the ditches cleared out. So we have Atlantic stone walls coming in to help us with some of our larger ditches that have to be done by hand, and he'll be starting on Burr Hill this next coming week. 34 work orders were sent in on drainage issues for the month of June. That's on top of, work orders are on top of the original or the normal day-to-day for Public Works. 14 of those were completed out of those 34. There was 107 work orders in general that have come into Public Works in June. 142 and 107 were completed. Right now, the pickleball shade structure is just about completed down at the Racket Sports Center. They're mowing daily, cutting the facilities, easements, and parks. We had 44 violations sent in for CPI. 15 of those have been complied. That's just for the month of June. Permits have been applied for dredging, and we just submitted a permit to put a fence up, which will be done in-house at the playground here at White Horse Park. So that's been put in. To touch base on our amenities, our pools, our racket center, marina have all been very busy. I did want to touch, because I've heard this week a couple comments on the pools, which we hit capacity pretty early, but I just wanted to highlight two of our busier pools. Between Monday and Friday this week at the Yacht Club, we had 1,803 guests. 132 of those were non-residents. The rest were all residents and members. So I know that there's been some conversation about non-residents. I just wanted to put that out there. We do have a program that gives us that. And then at Mumford's Pool, 1,492 guests were there between Monday and Friday, and 127 of those were non-residents. So our residents are using the pools, which is great, and our pool members. Camp is full and has been very busy with a waiting list. Hopefully all of you got to enjoy our 4th of July event. Debbie Donahue had a vision of putting it over the pond and combining both the day event and the evening fireworks. And between the rec department, Public Works, the Ocean Pines Police Department, Fire Department, Fire Marshal, Maryland State Police, Worcester County Sheriff's Office, and all the volunteers from the Neighborhood Watch, we were very happy with how the event came out, and we'll be looking to do that again next year. The geese were all back the next day, so don't worry for our friends that we're worried about them. They were funny to watch running around, but they were back, and none of them were hurt. So I just wanted to put that out there. On the bulkheads, can you go to the next slide, please? So I've been updating this each month. This shows us where we are within our spending. So the blue is our current contract budget, and the yellow shows you what we've spent to date. Fisher Marine is expected to be completed at West Mallard within these next 2 weeks. Mertec is finishing Westfield Circle, starting with the backfill there. And McGinty Marine is finishing Ebb Tide, and then we'll be starting on Pintail. I will say going forward, and I reiterated it last month, that we will not be doing bulkheads going forward during the summertime. Right now, we're just trying to complete contracts that were already in place so we can get those done, but going forward, we will not have that issue. And can you go one more slide, please? So these are our major project spending to date. I want to point out that the White Horse Park Playground came in $600 under budget, which is great. All the other ones are within range and on target, so we're looking good there. And I think that the next slide is going to show you the reaction that we're getting at the playground. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Colby. Next item on the agenda, public comments. Just be advised, when you come up for a public comment, please state your name and your address. The floor is now open for public comments.
Hi, my name's Claudia Hollywood, and
Stay close to the microphone.
oh, sorry. My name's Claudia Hollywood. I reside at 127 Sandy Hook Road, part-time. I have a concern about the Mediacom contracts that you're going to be voting on today, because I'm finding Mediacom is like terrible. There's just a lot of interruptions. They don't seem to be reliable. I have a brother who works from home, and he has to go someplace at times just to make sure he has continued coverage. I have spoken to other people who also work from home, and they're having issues with Mediacom. You call them, yes, they come out and they might fix something, and my brother waited for 2 years for them to finally bury the cable that they hooked up. So I'm just hoping, I wish there was, is there another service provider? I mean, I have Verizon at my other primary residence. I don't know if it's available here. I know Delaware has Verizon or Comcast, but there's got to be something either better, or they have to be held accountable for their service. The other thing, too, is I did email the board when they first notified us that the pool passes were not going to be continuous or carried over, which really upset me, but I never had one response from the board. So I received your email from the administration building. I don't know who it goes to, if it went anywhere, but I would have expected something in response to it. I mean, I know it was supposedly a treasury issue or a treasurer issue, but I prepay my assessment, and that doesn't seem to be a problem. So I don't understand why these pool passes is such an issue to carry over from year to year. I don't use them that frequently because we tend to go to the beach, but when I have family here or friends here, I would like to use them, and I don't necessarily use them all in 1 year. Okay?
Two things real quick. Number one, first, let me apologize for not getting back to you. I think it's an oversight on our part that we failed to do so. However, I would direct you to the GM's office. They can give you the exact reasoning behind the need to make sure that we don't let the pool cars carry over from year to year. The second part of it is, if you're going to be around after the meeting, I have an individual at Mediacom that you can direct, that we escalate complaints to.
I have somebody coming today.
Okay. And if not, please send me an email, and I'll give you the the email address of this individual from Mediacom that'll be able to, that, like I said, we use to escalate problems like the ones you just reported. Okay?
But is there anything else? I mean,
At this time, no. But,
Okay.
we're certainly looking at options.
and how long is the contract going to be approved for?
So, before we
The
turn
one
this
that
into
you're-
the discussion, you'll hear some more during the discussion that we have when the motion
Okay.
is brought up. But contracts like this, remember, this is not a retail contract. It is a right-to-use contract. In other words, we're giving Mediacom and any other service
Right.
providers the access to our easements and rights of way, okay? So think of it in those terms.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments?
Good morning. My name is Laura Pangratz. I live at 2 Harpoon Road, which really should be a court. But I am a part-time resident. A couple things that I just wanted to mention real quick is, number one, I appreciate you having meetings on a Saturday occasionally so that somebody like me that may not be here in the middle of the week and all of that can attend. I do get pretty excited when I see on the billboard by the North Gate entrance when the meetings will be, and I'm here and in town and can go. So please keep advertising your meetings. I also appreciate the fact that you will live stream and have these meetings for replay for those of us who cannot be here in person at every meeting or whatever is offered. My only complaint about that is I really need people to speak clearly, loudly into your microphones. It is so difficult to hear and understand everyone, even on replays sometimes, when we're not close to the microphone, we're not speaking. I know some of us are soft-spoken normally, but you got to speak up a little bit. So just keep that in mind, that for those of us that might be a little hard of hearing, yes, some of us young ones are, please, speak clearly for me. I appreciate also the fact that you had more than one candidate forum for the upcoming elections and everything. That was appreciative as well. I did have my neighbor ask me to comment and say, if we're spending all of this money on fixing everything else, could we please include the potholes that are in some of the roads and locations? One of them is, according to my neighbor at 1 Harpoon, is on Moby Dick Drive. I think that's a drive, I don't know. I don't know all the roads around here yet. I can get lost very easily in here. I'm afraid to go to yard sales because I won't make it back home. So he wanted me to mention that. My question in general, and I don't know who to ask that to, is, you know, when the homeowners association here talks about fining residents and everything for not keeping things, you know, up to code, nice, neat, and all of that, and yet we have utility markings that are just spray painted all over everything, even including across beautiful landscaping that people have spent money on. Your North Gate entrance now has lovely red markings all across the built-up wall and everything. And I know that's probably, I don't know who's doing that. I don't know, is that a state thing? Is that our Public Works thing? Whatever. Is there some other way you can mark utility markings? We've considered paving our driveway, but I have that little fear in me that I'm going to come back from my full-time home at the moment, have a nice, clean, neat paved driveway, and then have nice color-coded lines down it that I wasn't aware was going to happen. Because that happened on my gravel driveway a couple years ago when we first bought our place. So when we're talking about making our residents responsible and making the places look nice, is there any way we can also require our utility markings to be a little more discreet or use some other alternative form versus marking up someone's landscaping that they have spent their money on, those rock gardens, all that beautiful stuff, and then you have graffiti marks of lines, dotted lines on there. That's my observation from an outside person who is not here full-time and gets used to seeing all of that. Let's consider both sides here, because nobody can turn around and say, well, I'm going to fine you because you marked up my driveway or my garden and reimburse me the money that I put into trying to make it look nice. So when we are looking at who we're fining and why and all of that, let's look at ourselves as well when we're doing our construction and all of that. I did want to take a moment to thank you for coming in. I wore the appropriate shirt today out of luck. This is a nonprofit called Rage Against Addiction. I am a recovery coach in Harford County. I would love to do it also here, but I encourage Ocean Pines to support our efforts by the county here in promoting the success of those who are in recovery. It's not an easy journey, and it does affect all of us, and there is no age limit on addiction. So thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate the ability to be interactive with you. Not every group is like that, so thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments?
Sure. Tom Janicek, 17 Lookout Point. I just had a question for John, if I could. As soon as you said that, I'm like, damn, I'm the first one, and I screw it up. I know we're doing studies on the foundation at the golf course for the clubhouse. And I don't know, it's been 3 weeks since the demolition. I just want to know whether or not because we're going to put it back on the same footprint, do we know whether we can actually use the foundation yet? Have we had any of the studies back to tell us whether or not we can or we can't? Thanks.
Yeah, Tom, it's a very good question. We were actually out there yesterday with a team, what I believe, a team of the right team. We believe that we will use the foundation. We believe that everything that was addressed yesterday will be able to be incorporated. So the answer is yes, we should be able to use that foundation. We'll know more in a week. We have the engineer and everybody looking at it, as well as the foundation blueprints. So I feel very positive about it, and I think it's a real good question. But yeah, and I was hoping to, in a week or two, put something out there. But yep.
Thank you. Other public comments?
Richard Clemens, 61 White Sail Circle. The upcoming meeting with State Highway, the entrance north gate has always been inadequate for your emergency response teams. Your ladder truck, your mutual aid companies, if they're coming from the south end or some other community, has to go up and come in off of St. Martin's, okay? That time and effort, okay, for a community that has the demands that you have from St. Martin's out to the North Gate entrance is ridiculous. Architecturally, it was pleasing to give security with that guardhouse. If they're going to do anything to improve that entrance, it has to have wider capacity and wider load so that the vehicles can get in and get out, okay? That is more important than accommodating the Peninsula General demands that State Highway is trying to accommodate, okay? And State Highway, MDOT, I worked for them for my last 15 years. They are not going to give you a nickel, okay, that's not going to please some politician somewhere, okay? They're going to give you a circle with a single lane, but the volume that goes around that thing, if that's not a dual lane circle, it's a waste of money. If it's not an intermediate location, like at the entrance to Peninsula General or the bank, that's not going to accommodate this community. It's just going to slow things down. They're safe, but you need the accommodation of capacity. But more so, that bridge, it's not an asset. So if you're going to make a change in your future budget, make that change to be positive for your emergency service needs before you think about the old-time architectural flair. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments?
Hello, I'm short. My name is Linda Robinson. I live at 6 Upton Court, and I'm having a problem with my back neighbor at 9 Duxbury. Apparently, in 2005, he put up a fence and did not get a permit, and got a permit after the fact. We bought the property 5 years ago, and the fence is actually on our property. I've been to the Art Committee twice. They have sent a letter stating that he had 60 days to rectify it. Dino was out there a few weeks ago, and he said he was, the homeowner said he was not moving his fence. So I would like to know what is the procedure and how do we go forward, and what are the consequences for this neighbor having a fence on my property?
Well, I don't have every single answer. John, we've got obviously some background information since it's been reported. I believe 9 Duxbury was brought up last month as a CPI violation.
Yes, and I was just telling Kobe about it, and I'm glad that the lady said that we had, Dino was out there, we did look at it. You know, this is the type of situation where Ocean Pines versus a situation between two homeowners. I mean, normally this would be a situation, I'll be honest with you, it would have to be worked out between the two homeowners. I mean, right now, I'm not sure what we can do on that, if anybody else wants to jump in, but.
Well, I would like to say something.
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
is
yeah.
it me? It's on my property. The permit was approved. His fence is supposed to be 10 feet back from the back property. Why was it approved originally? It was an after-the-fact permit, so why wasn't he told in 2005 that he had to rectify that?
Right.
Why am I'm innocent here. I did nothing.
Right.
And it's
right.
not. I've already spent $250 to prove that it was on my property by getting a survey. I don't feel like it's my responsibility.
Yeah.
Ocean Pines did not enforce it. and they should.
No, in 2005, I mean, I understand that. I mean, I'm going to put to the board, but I mean, honestly, it's a legal situation.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
I was going to suggest, before we get into a long discussion on this, why don't we do this? Why don't we take the information?
Right.
Let's reach out to our attorney, present
Right.
the information, and
Yeah.
get some guidance. Can I
Yeah.
ask for a favor? Can you please email the general manager, just to remind him that we had this discussion, and we'll take that information, present it to our attorney, and look for options, and get back to you? Is it reasonable?
Okay, so what is the time frame that someone will get back to me?
As soon as we get the
Well,
information.
as soon as I
we
get
can-
that, I will send
we
it to
can
our
present it
attorney.
over.
We did talk about this. I told the board, or some board members the other day, that this was a legal situation, and that we would run it by Jeremy or our lawyer.
All right, so Tom, I'll allow one comment to keep things going. Tom, go ahead.
Okay. You met with the ARC on July 2nd?
I've been to 2 meetings, so the last 2.
Recently, in the
Yes.
this last week. And they have sent another letter with the package of
That was the first letter.
documentation
Correct.
with the surveys.
Correct.
Informing that homeowner that he must comply. So the clock is ticking again.
Okay, so what I'm asking is in 60 days, because he's already said he's not taking down the fence, in 60 days, what's going to happen? And how is Ocean Pines protecting my rights as a homeowner when I put up a shed and got a permit and did everything I was supposed to do, and I'm getting harassed in my backyard because he keeps saying I'm on his property, and I'm not.
Like I
His
said-
fence is on my property.
Again, before we
Right.
take this in a
Okay.
long, drawn-out conversation, let's follow the suggestion I made, and we'll you get the information to us, we'll get it to our attorney, get it in front of our attorney, and get an opinion as quickly as possible.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
so
And this
I-
was discussed during the week, and I did recommend that we had to go to our attorney, yes.
All right, so I need your email address.
Yeah, I'll give it to you.
Colby, I'll get.
Do you have Kobe's email address?
Yeah.
All right, send it to
You were
Colby, she'll give
copied
it
on
to
the
me.
letter, were you copied on that letter, or I know Colby was.
I know,
I'm
I've seen
not sure.
information on
I've
this.
seen it.
I know it's
Okay.
been discussed, and I've discussed it with a few board members, and as you heard them say, it's a legal situation. We will go to our lawyer first and see what it is that we can do. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
All right. And we'll
Thank
keep
you.
you updated. You have the email address? Yeah.
Other public comments?
Chris Billing, 18 Mallard Drive West. I was curious why the bulkhead stuff did go forward without any notification for the replacement. The last letter I have from the Pines was February of 2018. We were not notified of the June 11th start date of this year. And we had to remove all our power and all our stuff from the dock. We did that last year for the March 11th start.
Where's your location?
18 Mallard Drive West.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I do understand what you're saying. I know I tried to go down there. I talked to Eddie. Eddie spoke to you, yes? And look, there's no excuse for it. And I'm not saying, I'm just saying we're trying to follow up on it. They tried to get it finished. There was the situation with the contractor, which caused it, again,
Yeah, I
it
know.
was
I just-
before I was
it's
in
a
there.
mess. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand it. There was a situation with the contractor, and then they tried to get it finished. They have somebody in there. It's just unfortunate. We don't want to do this type of work at this time of the year. That all happened before I was there. It's not what I want. I did get your emails. We did talk about it. I know I sent Eddie down. I went down, but I think you were out of town just to
Yeah,
explain
it's
it
just,
to you.
being a part-timer, you don't know
I
what's
know.
going on. And you look at your camera, and your pier's cut up and laying on your dock.
I know. So, again, it's something that was already in place, and
But why was the reason to start? That's what I don't understand.
I wasn't here. I don't want to give you that answer. I asked,
Yeah, 'cause
I
mean,
was
if
told.
it was an emergency
Yeah.
repair
Right.
originally.
Right.
But why 18 months later
Yeah.
is it all of a sudden?
I understand it's
They could have
not.
waited till October.
Yeah, again, it was before, I don't want to use it, but it was before I was in there. It's not the way I believe it should be done.
Right.
What I heard was the contractor there was a situation with the contractor, and then they put the other contractor in there. It was my understanding, and maybe it didn't happen, it was my understanding that my team did speak to all the homeowners over there. I'm just telling you what I heard when I first came down.
Right.
But believe me, it's not something that I want going forward. I don't know.
Yeah,
I-
summer's gone. you know.
Right.
What you're saying,
No,
2
they
weeks.
said it's, right. Now, who's the last person you talked to? Did you speak to Eddie or?
No, I didn't meet with any of you. You wanted to meet last week.
Right, I know there was a timing thing. We went,
Yeah.
I did go down, but then Eddie said he spoke to you, because I was concerned about when I got the email or whatever it was, voicemail,
Yeah,
or
because I
whatever.
spoke to him before the email.
Right. And I did look into it. Those were the answers I received. I don't know what else to say. I mean, it happened
Yeah.
before I was there. We tried to do everything possible. It was my understanding that they spoke to all the homeowners and it was okay, but obviously it wasn't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could apologize, and I have no problem doing that.
Yeah, let me also apologize for the inconvenience. I know it's tough. I think it was an oversight. There was no malicious intent there. It's just
Yeah.
situational. It
Yeah.
doesn't make it any better. But I would publicly apologize for the inconvenience you've had to go through regarding
Right.
your bulkhead.
Yeah.
Same here, yeah.
But it shouldn't, October to April
know.
is cool.
Totally agree.
Yeah, agreed.
Totally agree. And I did, that was the reason I went down. I wanted to apologize to you, explain to you everything that I heard and saw, and that what would be happening going forward.
Okay.
All right, sorry again.
Yeah, thank you. Other public comments?
I'm Bill Bishop from 71 Pinehurst, and I have a question about this North Star product. Does the Ocean Pines own it? And I saw in the budget, I believe, a $200,000 contract for software support. Are we going to have anybody in the organization who works for Ocean Pines as a manager of the product? Or are we going to continue to drop $200,000 a year for maintenance? That was never mentioned. It's just that it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And in 2005, they tried to tell us how great the sliced bread was then, and it wasn't worth a TD. So I'm wondering if you could expand upon that, what North Star is and what this $200,000 is for, and are we going to support the product? Or is the organization just going to farm it out?
So within, and John, we can go, again, you guys know how I treat public comments. It should be comments and not discussion, but certainly inflexible enough to offer, when asked a specific question. Regarding the $200,000, that was regarding professional services support going along with the project in order for us to transition from the existing system into the new North Star system. Included in the subscription for the North Star services is support from North Star, okay? So that's as part of their software assurances. We know that we can actually go to them as part of the contractual agreement we have with them to support their software when problems come up and so on and so forth. I won't speak for the GM, but I think it's general knowledge and good business practice to make sure that we do have a subject matter expert on staff that understands all the inner workings of the North Star environment, both from a departmental level and a technical level. And I think those issues are certainly already being addressed. So that $200,000 is not an ongoing cost that will be needed in order to do product support. Okay?
So,
Do we own North Star, or are
we
leasing the product?
So we own a license to use the software, and we have an annual subscription for the technical services associated with that license.
So what I'll add to that too, and Doug did well on it, from a budget standpoint, from a finance standpoint, I will ensure that that type of detail for those numbers are broken out every time we do a budget or whatever so that everybody can see it. But it's certainly the intent to have our manager of IT be an expert in that software. Okay?
Thank you. Other public comments?
Good morning. My name is Donna Canary. I live at 19 Camelot Circle. I'd like to request that a stop sign be placed at the intersection of, it's the second intersection off of Camelot at High Sheriff. What is the process to have that done? And how can I be kept in the loop to make sure that it's being worked on?
Morning.
So-
Sorry.
I was going to say, certainly, number one, clearly, if you could send an email request to us so we can document it, make sure we've got the resources, and then I'll turn it over to Colby because we will have to do a little bit of research. Colby, go, please.
Pretty sure that you've received a lot of noise from some of the neighbors about the speeding because they've parked police cars on the street and they put the monitors for the speed. So you probably have a pretty big record of all the complaints about that area. But I can do that if you need me to.
No, if I can get your information after, are you going to stay for the meeting? And then I can keep you, I'm going to talk with our Public Works Director. We're meeting on Monday, just to get the procedure on putting up a stop sign, and then I'll keep you in the loop as we're working on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. Other public comments?
Tom Byerly, 6 Oceans End. Real quick, I know you're discussing the MAT or contract and everything. I moved here when the yacht club was first built and was there the first day it opened and went through all the debacle that we went through before when we tried to run it. I hope you all take this serious. Matt has done one hell of a job out there. You go up there every night, you can't find a parking place. They got great music. The food is good. They've turned this place around. That's what they wanted to do. And I hope you all realize if they leave here, we're in trouble. The yacht club's in trouble. So strong consideration on keeping these guys around. They're getting ready to open another business in Ocean City. They took a new restaurant they're getting ready to redo. Get on board with them as soon as we can. I think that would be, excuse me, a positive thing. And that's it. It's comment on that, which is good. Your lines and stuff, they have to put the lines down for utilities. All utilities are in public easements. So the people come down, know where they want to build. They call, they locate all the utilities. Most of them are not on private property. They have to get permission to come in to do that. So everything that they mark is in an easement. And they need to know where things are. Different groups have to get out there to inspect things. You got water, you got gas, power, you got all kinds of stuff in the ground, and people know where it is, hence misutility. So be patient with the stuff. It's a washable paint, doesn't last forever, and they need to have that stuff there. And there's no other way. You can't put a flag in concrete. So anyway, it'll be better. Thank you all.
Thank you. Other public comments? Seeing none, I'm going to close the floor for public comments. Thanks, everyone. Next item on the agenda is capital purchase requests. As of this meeting, we have no open capital purchase requests, so we'll move into the next item on the agenda, and that's CPI violations. First one is at 4 Leslie Muse.
For Leslie Muse, tree debris. And the recommendation is to send to OPA attorney for action. CPI recommends.
Can I make a comment? Any comment?
Just write down any comments they make, please.
I'll allow it.
Okay, this is an example to me of one of the situations where spending money to go to attorneys does not make sense. The picture that we have in front of us is a bunch of brush piled on the property. Rather than go to attorney, my recommendation would be Public Works gets over there, clears it up, and we bill the owner for that work instead of paying attorneys for this kind of action.
Yeah? I'm good with that. Actually, I spoke to Steve. We'll follow up then.
Very good. So consider that the action you're going to take, John?
That'll be the action, yes.
Okay. Wait a minute, hold on. So the violation has not been resolved yet. Therefore, we have to move to find 4 Leslie Muse, a continuing violation. I'll accept the motion as stated.
So moved.
Is there a second? All right. Any other discussion other than the fact that you will go in and clean out using Public Works rather than an attorney?
Yes.
Very good, okay. All those in favor of finding?
Comment.
Stand by. Discussion, go ahead, Frank.
I believe that we have to vote, and we need 6 members of the board to vote to put somebody on property.
Yeah, that's why we're getting ready to vote to find them in continuing violation. That's what the motion is. So it allows us to recognize that they have not resolved the issue, they're in continuing violation, and we can take action based on that violation. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, I'll call the question. All those in favor of finding 4 Leslie Muse in continuing violation of CPI, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, John, that allows you to take the action that you need to.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is 76 Battersea.
Right, 76 Battersea Road, violation, dog run, no permit. The recommendation we received, sent to OPA, attorney for action.
I'll entertain a motion to find 76 Battersea in continuing violation. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I'll give you this if you need.
Frank?
I think this is another case where Steve is, I don't think we should write a letter. I think we should instruct our attorney to get a court order and have the court order permit us to remove it and try to get it at the owner's expense for not only removing it, but for getting the court order.
Other discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of finding 76 Battersea in continuing violation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay.
Okay. And we can follow up on the discussion as necessary with regard to actions.
Yep. Colby
Next
said.
item, 33 Burr Hill Drive.
No, just give me a sec. Just give me a second. 33 Berry Hill Drive. Violation, addition, alteration, no permit. Recommendation
Go ahead.
from CPI, sent to OPA, attorney for action.
I'll entertain a motion to find 33 Burr Hill Drive in continuing violation.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Same discussion. I think we should go right to the court order. And with the request to remove the structure, and with the request to ask the court to have the owner not only pay for the removal, but for the legal fees in getting the court order.
Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of finding 33 Burr Hill in continuing violation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? John will follow up as necessary.
Okay, we'll move
Last
forward.
item on the agenda, 52 Cape Town Road.
'52 Cape Town Road, violation, maintenance. CPI recommendation, sent to attorney for action.
I'll entertain a motion to find 52 Cape Town Road in continuing violation.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion.
Same discussion. Go for the court order to put our people on board, to repair it as necessary, bill the owner, and have him pay for the court order.
Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of finding 52 Cape Town Road in continuing violation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item on the agenda, unfinished business. The motion is to accept the current version of the Mediacom contract that was submitted for review and approval. Purpose and effect. The approval of the contract will allow us to move forward from the month-to-month terms that are currently in place and enable the new terms and conditions of the negotiated contract. Background. The contract has been reviewed and negotiated by an assigned work group, the attorneys for each party, and the board of directors. The new contract provides the same standard services, but also addresses several important issues, including compliance with federal law regarding the removal of exclusive use of easements and the rights of way. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All right, I'll say. A couple of things. Number one, I think it's very important for the community to know that this is not a retail agreement. It's a right-of-way agreement, okay? Back in 1978, when the contract was first created, the federal government allowed the exclusive use of the rights-of-way. What that means is company X, Y, or Z that wanted to come in and also provide services could not use the same easements that Mediacom was granted the exclusive use of. Right? In 2006, I believe, the FCC has rescinded that and say you can no longer have exclusive rights, okay, and use of those easements and rights of way, all right? So in essence, this allows us now to be in compliance with a new contract that now allows future and any interested parties to come in, and they know they won't be bound by having to come through some other easement or some other right-of-way. They can actually use the existing ones, right? So once this information gets out to the general public, now, I'm somewhat of an optimist. I hope it will generate some interest by other service providers. However, that being said, the incumbent certainly has the crux of the market, and I'm sure that there's algorithms that the other service providers use to determine take rate, whether or not an investment is worthwhile, and so on and so forth. So I don't want to set a wrong expectation, but what this does is it cleans up and puts us with a current contract that, again, is not bound by the terms and conditions of the old contract. Again, nothing in retail. The other thing it also does is it provides the ability for us to retain the fees. Right now, the current contract says we get 3% of the cable TV revenue, their gross revenue, all right? And that's part of, and it's, the parlance they used back then was a franchise fee or a right to use fee, so on and so forth. The new contract allows us to have 1.6% of all the services, which includes phone, internet, and cable TV. The benefit there is as the medium evolves and the way people consume information changes over time, there's going to be much more of a demand for internet services and less of a demand on basic cable TV services. The terms and conditions that are in this new contract somewhat protect us because as the revenue for the internet usage grows, we will also be able to realize some of that. Where in the current contract, if internet business rose, we get no parts of that. At the end of the day, it's pretty much a wash. I think in the last year we collected somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $160,000 as part of that original term and condition in the original contract, based on the current business model and the current subscription services. We will net pretty much exactly the same thing. The benefit, again, being is if the internet services grow and the cable TV goes down, we'll certainly be able to realize that. Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion to accept the Mediacom contract as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. There's no more unfinished business, so we'll move on to new business. There is a discussion of funding new capital. Frank. No, it's not a motion. It's just, this is on the agenda. It's a discussion. So the floor is open for the discussion. No, that will be afterwards.
You want me to read it for you, Frank? You want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead, read it, please.
So the topic is funding new capital. The concise statement is the purpose of this discussion is to discuss the current issue of funding new capital projects, specifically that any new capital goes directly against the operations budget and the annual assessment, and discuss potential methods of funding new capital that overcomes the issue. Background, any project deemed new capital goes against the operations budget, and that directly affects the annual assessment. Every $8,452 of new capital increases the annual assessment by $1. This creates an issue for each and every homeowner. Suggestion to improve the community if the item suggested is not currently on the association ledgers.
Okay, we'll open the floor for discussion. Frank.
Okay, the new capital, as the motion says, anytime that we hear a suggestion to do something that's not in the reserve study, basically, it goes to the operating budget, and it would go to, as new capital, which would go directly to the assessment. So when one of you in the community approaches us and says, it would be nice to have street lighting at certain intersections, it would be nice to light the Southgate Pond, it would be nice to add on to the sports court pool, any number of things that, or cover mailboxes, okay? That goes right to new capital, which goes right against the assessment. So as a result of that, new capital spending is very low, but new things to enhance the community are also passed by, okay, so, or foregone because of the impact on the assessment. So one of the reasons I wanted, actually two reasons I wanted to discuss this. Number one, this is Tom's last board meeting, and the park has a kind of unique way of collecting new capital that does not directly affect the assessment. And the second reason is, as you know, this year, this board has tackled drainage to the tune of $977,000 in the budget. There are at least conceptually some issues being discussed to address drainage, which would fall under new capital. And I think one of the things that we found is when you replace existing pipes under an existing road, it gets very expensive. One of those projects this year was $244,000. There could be more coming down the road that could even be more expensive that would hit new capital. And whereas, you know, buildings, I think, are somewhat negotiable, I think when you're talking about people's homes potentially being flooded, it's something that we should have in advance. Now, the other issue with this is we have attempted to fund new capital in the past by various ways. And there are a number of different ways for discussing it. And each way has pros and each way has cons. But some of the issues that have to be addressed as part of this is, as an association, we also don't have a capital plan. So in the past, we were collecting money and not necessarily spending it from you, which is not a good policy. Okay, when we collect something, it should be for a board-approved plan that's approved by the community. And without that, that's a problem. Because if you don't have that, you have what has been referred to, and I think what is somewhat accurately described, maybe not as intent, but as, in fact, what happens, a slush fund. And we certainly don't want that to happen when we start funding new capital. So with that, I'd like to turn it over and get Tom's input as to what the park does.
Thank you, Frank. What you should know that in the United States, there are over 330,000 homeowner and condo associations supporting 65 million people, okay? So this is nothing new across the board where you have a reserve fund, an operating fund, and a capital improvement fund. As Frank just said, you can't take people's money without a purpose, and those purposes must be stated. We already know that we have our reserve accounts because we have to replace things. And in fact, people who lived here 20 years ago, you pay as you go, as you use things, paid into that reserve fund. And that's why we replace buildings. That's why we replace floors, lights, and things like that. Then you have your operating account. And a big part of that operating account is salaries and benefits and electricity, gas, fuel for our trucks, and other things. What we did in the park, in the inception, the developer came up with an initial contribution fee. When you moved into the park, you paid $450. That was something that was paid at settlement. That has increased in 2008 to $1,000. So when you buy a home in the park, at the settlement table, the buyer, or negotiation through the seller, $1,000 is set aside, and it goes right to the park into their budget. So this is something that we've been doing, and it works. It works in other communities. To give you an example, if there was a $300 buy-in fee, and we sell 300 houses here, that's $90,000 we would get. And that could be put into a capital improvement fund. You could also cut out some money from the reserve fund to put in there. But the capital improvement fund is kind of tricky how you fund it, but you really have to have community buy-in because a lot of people who are sitting here, who are watching this on TV and who are going to watch it on YouTube and say, why should I spend money on stuff? I'm not going to be here in another 10 years or what have you. Homeowners associations and condo associations are supposed to maintain buildings and properties and common areas to protect the value of your home. Not only that, they have to up the ante and make it even better as time goes on to attract people to the premier resort community that we wish to be. And what I did is I looked at the 2018 survey results that was put out to the community, and it's actually posted on the OPA website. And some of the things I took away from that are things that you probably would like to do. For instance, a paved path around the Southgate Pond. So therefore, strollers, children, people who may be infirmed can easily get around it and for exercise, for walking, and so on and so forth. Right now, it's pretty much, it's got roots, it's stone, and that sort of thing. And as Frank said, the roof over the mailboxes and include lighting. And also, most of you are probably Amazon users. We need to add parcel boxes to those areas so the Postal Service can deliver that rather than leaving it at your home. Another issue was the lighting of certain areas along Ocean Parkway for safety. And lastly, I know that this was an initiative last year that didn't go anywhere. It was an expansion of the sports core pool area for after-school activities. So these are wants. The needs are need to replace, the need to fund our operations. The wants are things we want to do to improve the community. And so that's why Frank has asked this question, and it's in motion. That's what we did in the park. And it allows us to make improvements to our community. We put in some additional lighting, benches for people who want to walk the trails. And we have a lot of trails behind the post office here. It goes on and on. There's no place to sit. And I just think that a capital improvement fund would be beneficial to the community.
Other discussion? All right. I have a couple of questions. So we've talked about how we're funding this capital improvement fund. What I haven't heard is how we can control disbursements. What I haven't heard is, are there any items that would run across a fiscal year? In other words, if we earmark something in a capital improvement effort and it exceeded the amount we could collect based on the funding mechanisms we talked about, how do we protect that funding so that it remains earmarked for its original intended purpose? All right. My concern, everybody's talked about this before, any 4 directors, the majority of the board, can change something, plain and simple. All right. My question is, what mechanisms, are there legal mechanisms? Are there ways we can ensure, I guess what I'm looking at, and I'm not against this, don't get me wrong. What I want to do is make sure if we start going in this direction, that we protect that investment, that we say, for example, Tom, to use your point, we want to put a walking path around the South Pond, and it costs $75,000. I'm just making up numbers, okay? But based on our funding mechanism, which I think is very reasonable, we only collect $60,000 this year, okay? So one would say, well, we don't want to spend money we don't have, all right? We're not going to change the funding mechanism, so I have to defer this project until next year, okay? So what mechanisms, what controls can we put in place to allow us to make that decision, to be certain that, you know what, we still need another, $15,000 out of next year's capital improvement fund, and the second part of that is, how do we prioritize those things? All right. So now I want a path around the South Pond. I want covers over all the mailboxes. I want a stop sign at the middle of the road. Whatever the capital funding request is, how do we prioritize? What criteria do we use so that we, A, understand the priority, and B, are consistent in applying the tenets to develop that priority. Because what I don't want to do is run into the squeaky wheel situation, okay? All of a sudden, some issue comes up, and it becomes the most important thing because of the vociferous participation of somebody saying, this is the greatest thing, I must have it, we have to do it now, and it ends up, we have to have that level of control. And so I'm actually anxious to hear what we can do collectively to at least socialize this, get some input from the community, and say, are there things that we should be looking at to make sure? Because I vote absolutely no, because the idea of slush fund, all right, has been around a long time, because let's call it like it is. We start collecting money. Why are you taking money out of my pocket, putting it in that fund for something I can't control? If I know it's going to something, yeah, I have a different story, okay? So I want to protect the association's finances, the members, who are participating in, funding that, capital improvement fund, and we don't protect that environment. And I see someone raising a hand who I certainly want an opinion, so I'll entertain a motion to suspend Robert's rules.
So moved.
Second? Any concern? All right, I'll suspend Robert's rules. Gene, would you come up to the microphone, please?
Some of your concern.
Microphone.
Gene Ringstore, 5 McAfee Court. I'm also your assistant treasurer for still another month. Some of the questions you've addressed just now, I've tried to answer in a policy and procedure proposal for funding new capital that I originally issued and submitted to the Budget and Finance Committee at John Viola's request, my boss, as treasurer. And I had revised that and expanded it more to try to give some of these protections. The procedure policy that I submitted has not been vetted yet by the Budget and Finance Committee. So I think we're getting a lot of ideas here from, I know Larry Perrone has made it a point of his campaign, and he wants to fund it one way. You have another way. I developed a third method and built some safeguards in it. But anyway, this is something that I believe eventually should fall into the hands of the Budget and Finance Committee to review all these proposals. So I'll just make that comment.
Gene, thank you. Other discussion? Frank?
Yeah, I mean, let me give you the good news and the bad news. The good news is things are going really well in Ocean Pines right now. The bad news is when things are going really well, the issues that are left are complex, contentious, and extremely difficult to address. And this is one of them. So I think to address some of your things, and I know as the liaison to the Budget and Finance Committee, I would take it this way. Before I personally would vote for anything to go into any fund, there would have to be a plan developed by the general manager and the operations team that would be approved by the board, discussed with the community, and where we have a feeling that it has broad community support. Because let's be just perfectly blunt and honest. The formula for getting things done in the past here that involve new capital is you put 100 people where you all are sitting, they storm the board meeting, they all talk about it at 5-minute increments, and the board sits up here looking like a deer in the headlights and says, aye, okay? And that's not a way to fund new capital. So that's number one. Number two, after you have that plan, you hard code things in, because we can say, just like we talked earlier, for us to send somebody on somebody's property, the bylaws say that you have to have a vote of 6 directors. We can say when we set up this fund, it can't be moved anywhere else unless it's a vote of 7 directors. So unless you're dealing with a true emergency caused by a natural disaster, like a hurricane hitting the beach club, okay, that the money can't be moved to cover operating expenses or something else. The third thing is we have caps on it, and we can hard code a cap on it to specifically say no single expenditure can exceed the amount in the fund, and you can hard code that in there. So things can be hard coded in. Now, the good thing about that is we've had experience with this I moved in 2013 when we were collecting, I think, $50. So I know the downside of that program, so we can hard code things in. But we don't know what we don't know, and that's why I wanted to start this discussion so we could get broad community input as to, here's what really concerns me about this whole idea. But some basic things, plans have to be in place, vetted, approved by the board, vetted by the community, hard numbers in terms of moving the funds around so it doesn't become the backstop to an operating loss. We can all hard code that in before we elect to move forward. And that's the purpose really for starting the discussion and getting input. Quite frankly, not only input from the board and the operating team, but input from you all that are homeowners.
Other discussion? Colette?
I would be in favor of giving this to Budget and Finance and have them do some research and make some recommendations. I think you bring up a lot of great points, Frank, and I think we need a systematic way to look at all of the things that have been discussed, what Jean has presented, what Tom has presented, and come back to the board with, and the community with some recommendations of how the concerns that have been addressed today or brought up today can be addressed.
Other discussion? Jeff?
Trying to get the button to work. I think there are some really good points in the discussion. I think we need to change the number of directors that need to vote for this stuff. I think we need to do things like not just saying aye, but named votes for something like this. I think caps are a good idea. We don't know what we don't know, so we have to be careful with caps, but I think they can be useful. And I think the community would be fairly supportive of reasonable stuff. Okay, if we're actually making improvement and making people's lives better or property values higher, I think we'll see more support than if we're off on a lark trying to do something weird. And I think we use the publicity of that stuff and the increasing cap on the number that have to vote for it. I think we can use some of those things together to put reasonable controls around this. Are they going to be perfect controls for everything in all situations? Probably not. But they can be pretty good. And we can be taking a higher profile responsibility, those members of the board, and we ought to require a positive recommendation on something from Budget and Finance. That's a different organization. It's not the same people. And I think we could also, if need be, we ought to put in a mechanism that says if we have something really big and important, let's charter a work group made up mostly of members and let them look at it. Work groups can be very, very valuable, provided they're given the right kind of charter. And I would propose the right kind of charter, which says, I really want you to approve this stuff. If you don't see the value there, fine, we can agree to disagree, but your opinion is going to count, and you have to weigh in. And if you don't, not going anywhere. So I think we can construct a couple of different things that would really make it safe. I think the issue of slush funds, for lack of a better term, is an issue to be worked because we don't want to do that. And one of the ways we can make that really effective is to not do it. As a board, we cannot backstop somebody else's lousy planning somewhere, maybe our own, with something branded new capital. And we shouldn't be hiding that stuff at all. We should be proud of it. In fact, if we're really doing good, like we think, We should be proud of that. We propose that. What do you all think? What do the members think? Maybe they don't ever want to do that. Okay. That's an input. You take it. Maybe you turn around and don't do it because of that input. But you got the input. And we listen, we pay attention, and we keep the process as open as we can, consistent with, there are a couple other things that argue against that a little bit, so you got to pay attention to those. But keep it as open as we can, and welcome comment and welcome disagreement. You don't like my proposal for benches on a walking trail? Fine. Tell me why. Don't just stand up and scream, I don't like it. Tell me why you don't like it. Let's have a discussion. Let's have a debate. And I think in an open process, we can get enough controls around this that it won't feel like slush fund stuff. It's not intended to be. And I think we can go from there. That's what I would do. And I would charter Budget and Finance to take a first look at it and have their 2 cents at this point in time. Not that that's the be-all and end-all, but it's valuable. We should do that.
Another discussion. So a couple things. Number one, I heard that, again, I'm in support of this with the right control mechanisms in place, all right? And I've heard things like CAP. I've heard things like adjusting how we can address these things. The other thing that comes to mind is with regard to prioritization. I think we've got the community survey that might give us a little bit more insight, perhaps another survey on what kinds of things that there we throw out potential candidates for a capital investment and see what the community thinks about it. The other side of this too is that, Gene had brought up, some information about something he's proposed. So we could discuss this for a long period of time, but my suggestion to my colleagues here would be, we've opened the dialogue. Perhaps the next order of business would be, let's refer it to our advisory committee, the Budget and Finance Committee, and task them with the fact that we've had this initial discussion. We're looking for their insights, their recommendations, their options for us to consider as we carry on this conversation further and further to a point where we can finally make a decision. So any other thoughts on that approach?
Just one final. I think this discussion was intended as the heads up to 3 organizations. Number one, to the operating team, get ready to put together a capital plan for this upcoming budget session. Number 2, to Budget and Finance and to this board, get prepared to do what we have to do to fund a capital improvement plan that's developed by the management team, that's approved by the community. And by the way, since I've lived here in 2013, we haven't had that. It's a crapshoot. It's what somebody brings to the table each year. And that's not a way to run a 12,000 resident community.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, unless there's any other discussion, I'll close the floor for that discussion and move on to the next item on the agenda, which was added at the beginning of the meeting when we amended the agenda, and it's a motion from Colette. Colette.
So this is a motion to authorize the GM to negotiate a contract for the compensation study. And the motion is to authorize the GM to negotiate a contract not to exceed $100,000 for a full compensation study to include analysis of all positions and salaries, external salary survey, benefit study, development of a compensation philosophy, and development of an implementation plan. The purpose, in effect, is to provide OPA with a current and comprehensive review of our compensation policies, approach, and philosophy, and a plan for implementation of needed compensation adjustments. Background. In the last 2 budget cycles, OPA has made decisions impacting benefits and compensation for employees with the promise to employees and OPA members that a professional compensation study would be conducted to guide present and future decisions. An RFP went out to several vendors. 1 bid was received. Outreach to vendors who did not bid revealed that the job either was too large for their capabilities or that their current workload would not accommodate our timeline. The bid was reviewed by the GM's work group tasked with developing the RFP and reviewing the bids. There was unanimous agreement that the process outlined in the bid is exactly what is needed for a product that would provide enduring benefit and guidance for compensation policy decisions, and that the qualifications of the principals are stellar. The bidder has extensive experience doing this type of work for Eastern Shore municipalities, including Ocean City, Wilmington, Delaware, and Rehoboth Beach, as well as large-scale HOAs. The work group reviewed references and is recommending that the GM be authorized to negotiate a contract for the survey and follow-up services for a figure not to exceed $100,000. It is acknowledged that this far exceeds the figure that was budgeted for this activity, but the work group unanimously agreed that it is justified based on need for the scope of services the bidder proposed.
Is there a second?
So moved.
No. I asked for a second.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion.
I realize that there was sticker shock associated with this motion. And I think we need to reflect on what has been done in the past. We've had two efforts at a pay study, one that was conducted by an outside entity at fairly low cost. It didn't look at compensation as a whole, it looked at pay only. And we also had a salary survey that was conducted internally. Neither of those, there was no implementation of an adjustment plan based on either of those studies. And that's a problem that arose from questions of credibility regarding the numbers that were obtained in those surveys, and also credibility of a comprehensive across-the-board process for implementing pay adjustments, either upward or downward, and that's a huge problem. We owe it to the members and to our employees to get this done in time for the next budget cycle, because this past year we agreed as a board to soften the blow of the change from the 100% employer-paid health insurance policy to a 20% employee-paid cost of the policy premium by giving a kind of a bonus back to employees. At the same time, we agreed that we would give no raises this past year, and that in the next year we would have the information needed to, make rational decisions about pay increases and pay adjustments based on the belief that there are some employees that are overpaid, there are some employees that are underpaid. People, the feedback that I get is that we have a stable employee workforce, and that's true. This is not something we need in order to retain and attract new employees. We need it because our current pay system favors compensation based on longevity, independent of performance quality. We need to move from the step and grade plan that we currently use that favors longevity to a plan that is more in keeping with business like running of our decision-making process for pay. The min, mid, max system is one that feeds into our priority as a board to have performance reviews and compensation linked to achievement of specific performance objectives within each department. This year, we asked all of our departments to give us business plans that have specific goals and objectives, with the intention that employees from top to bottom will be held accountable for those performance objectives. Looking at this readjustment of our approach to compensation feeds into that. That's part of running things based on performance quality and sticking to business objectives. I'll let it go at that. I think there are other members of the board who are also going to be able to feed in some information regarding this.
Other discussion. Frank?
Yeah, I think like most people, that when we saw the price of this, there was a bit of sticker shock, but and kind of wrestled with it, but it's one that I'm in favor of doing, and this is one of these, again, it's a complex, contentious issue, okay? For now, 3 years running, we have dealt one way or another with what we consider getting the compensation system for our employees to be what I call fair. Now, look, to be perfectly honest, fair is a point of view kind of issue. Employees have one idea what's fair, homeowners have another idea what's fair, and unfortunately or fortunately, we're elected and our job is to determine what is fair, okay? And I don't think this is one that we can kick down the road, because in the last year's budget cycle, it was one of the more complex, contentious, divisive issues that the board had to face. And here's some just facts behind it, okay? 47%, and if I'm off a percent or two, forgive me, and Gene, don't let your hair catch on fire, but 47% of our budget, which drives your assessment, comes in the form of wages and benefits, okay, number one. Number two, we haven't looked at it for years, and we're not a campground anymore. We're essentially a city of 12,000 people that have close to 100 full-time employees. The other thing that's important to understand, one of the things, not only are we looking at wages, but we're looking at benefits. So when 47% of your budget is comprised of wages and benefits are going up 10 to 12% a year, primarily driven by health care, and you expect us to hold, and fairly expect us to hold, the budget close to the cost of living, it's kind of a tough task if you're shooting in the dark and not knowing where you're going, which leads to the information that we have. Over the past 3 years, we've conducted 2 compensation studies. This is what I see in trying to determine if something's fair. One of the compensation studies says that none of our employees are overpaid. One says that about 10% plus are overpaid. One of the compensation studies didn't include the police force, which is 25% of our budget. The other compensation study didn't look at comparable homeowners associations to see what they paid. Neither of the studies looked actually at our benefits. And I, for one, have been pretty blunt in saying I think past boards have looked up here and have said aye for the health care benefit, not knowing that we didn't have a Cadillac health care benefit, but in some cases it was a Rolls Royce. Okay? They didn't know. We have to look inside the benefits and see what are comparable organizations offering in terms of coverage, in terms of co-pays, in terms of deductibles. And then we have to present that to both the employees and the homeowners and determine what is fair. Because the other thing we're dealing with, folks, is this is a locked system. Basically, anything that goes above the cost of living, okay, or anything that when somebody says we'll give somebody a 6% raise, you're expecting 2%, they're expecting 6%, that goes directly to the assessment because it's not like there's an additional revenue source. And the other thing that's kind of inconvenient, but something that we have to deal with in this planning, we have now government-mandated increases over the next several years, which will impact our budget. So it's time to do it with as much information as we can, and to be, and again, fair is a point of perspective issue, but to be as fair as we can, not only to the employees, but to the homeowners.
Other discussion. Jeff?
One of the things to think about when looking at something like a compensation study is that it has shelf life. It's very much like a building. We spend all the money to build a building, but the value from that building occurs over a period of time. It's the same thing with a study like this. And in fact, we're in the middle of reference checks right now, and the references are making that point before we ask. They're saying, we, the reference, have seen reasonable shelf life. What does that mean? It means it doesn't have to be redone every year or every 2 years. In some cases, the longevity is looking like 5 or 6 years, at which point a refresh is done, which is not the same as doing the whole bloody thing all over again. It's much less effort and, of course, time and expense. So this is not something that just occurs today. It occurs with value over a period of time, and that's what other people who have done studies with this particular provider have said to us they think the biggest value is. It's the fact that it lives for 5 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, where to pick a number. There is value there. And so if we're going to look at the cost, at a minimum, mentally, you ought to divide it by the number of years the thing's going to provide value. And then it looks like a different animal. It doesn't look like the take your breath away fee. It looks like something that makes sense.
Other comments, Colette?
I also want to add that the references are telling us that the numbers, the salary and benefit numbers, are an important piece, but not the biggest value to them. The biggest value to them has been the ability to predict what what we're going to have to budget for pay over time. And the other value that they see is in the process that was, the process options that were presented and recommended from the consultant as to how to implement the pay changes. And I think that was a big weakness of what we've asked for in the past. In the past, we've asked for numbers. We haven't looked at, okay, we have these numbers, how are we going to implement changes? And as Frank points out, we have some mandated legal changes in our compensation that we're facing. And the references are telling us that that process, having assistance with that process, has been the biggest benefit to them as employers in this process. And that's where the extra expense comes in. What we've done before is we've gotten numbers. Anybody can get numbers. We could do that ourselves. What we don't have is the expertise to be able to perform the implementation process and decide how best to implement for our organization. I think we've learned over the years that I've been on the board that we are not experts at doing a bunch of stuff, including running the yacht club, building buildings. You know, there are a lot of things that we've faced up to the fact that we need professionals to help us with. This is one of those things.
Steve?
Yeah, I'm one of those people that is still recovering from sticker shock. Our budget, I believe that we approved, included $25,000 for doing this study, and now we're looking at 4 times that amount, which is pretty excessive. I guess my biggest concern is whether our GM can find $75,000 in the current budget to fund this. I do support it. I agree with Colette that there are some things that the board can do well with the expertise that we have, and there are some things we can't do at all. And I think this is one of those that we can't do. We do need to get outside help. And so I would support this as long as we can figure out some way to fund it.
So conceptually, I support it as well for a number of reasons. Number one, going back to Frank, you brought up a very good point about the other studies. The other studies were somewhat incomplete, okay? Some contained information that was valuable. Others didn't contain the information that was needed in order to make a decision. However, if you put the two together, I don't even think, having read both the 5L study and the internal study, and also not being an expert in compensation package review and planning, that we didn't have all the information that we needed, okay? So the question there is, do we need this? Yes, we do, and I think for a number of reasons. Number one, it provides us a professional reference point for long-term planning for employee benefits and a better understanding of what is driving increases in the assessment. Okay, if we can present, so it's much different to say, well, we decided to give everybody a 2% raise and it's another $3 on your assessment. At the very least, what I see, having this reference information says, Here's the guidelines that have been given to us by industry professionals. Here is the information that we can use in our planning efforts as we go forward, okay? I think also coupled with, and I think, Colette, you were a champion, and I agree with it, of the sort of performance review, kind of looking at another step in the performance evaluation of employees and tying that back to a level of increase, which now in turn is tied back to a referenceable document that says, in this particular area of this particular position, here's the growth pattern. Here's where you can see career development and salary and benefit compensation changes. So it serves as a very referenceable document. Now, that's all roses and wonderful things. Here's the downside, okay? At 100K, okay, I also have sticker shock, okay? All right, so what, and you guys saw the email I sent to you guys yesterday, highlighted some of the points that I was making about, looking at this cost breakdown and kind of analyzing and saying, well, gee, what it is. Rather than going into all of the morbid detail, I think one of the things that we collectively have to do in conjunction with our general manager is to find out what parts of these can be options. What parts do we already have? What parts maybe that we don't need? For example, and I had a question in this, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but want to update or draft job classifications for all recommended job titles. Well, to me, that kind of starting from scratch. Why am I paying somebody to give us information that we already have? Maybe it should be worded as a review of the current operational model and making recommendations. But a full-blown update of every job classification recommended job title to me is a waste of money. It's a waste of membership money, and I don't need to pay somebody to tell me something I already know. Again, not going into some of these details, but I think there are points within this cost breakdown where we need to push that vendor. All right, we need to have a confidence to say, I think we have that information, and if we're kind of on the fence, we present it to them and say, here's the information we have, here's what we believe, prove me right or wrong. All right, rather than having them do all the work. I use this example as a way to negotiate that contract down. Maybe we can get it from 100 down to 75, if we kind of look at some of this stuff. I think we challenge ourselves. We should be challenging ourselves to make sure that we make every effort to ensure that we're not just going, okay, write a check, thank you very much, come back with the results, and we'll all be happy. No, we owe the membership, we owe ourselves, we owe the employees that level of effort to make sure that we fine-tune this thing and get it very, very efficient and effective at the same time. And that's what I'm looking for. I generally agree with the concept, and I will vote for the motion. However, the caveat that we're not just signing a blank check here for 100K. I think we've got a lot of work to do, and I would challenge us as a board and our general manager and anybody else that needs to be involved in that discussion to have that, socialize it, and work towards a solution that will reduce that amount. Other discussion? Colette.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Doug, that I did go over this with a fine-tooth comb, discussed it with members of the work group, and there are definitely some areas that we can find some savings. That $100,000 was a figure that the committee came up with as ample funds. We do not need to go for ample. We need to go for what's needed. And you're right, there are things that we have done that need review, perhaps, but not being paid to redo.
Other discussion? Frank?
Yeah, I guess how to put this, and since I don't know the politically correct way, I'll say it this way. I think this is a stress test for the board and the management team. And I think the challenge is that John has work groups that are working on this. It's his responsibility to find the money, and it's his responsibility working with us to negotiate this thing down to down from $100,000. And I think the way that real boards do this with real solid management teams is this is not to exceed, and the challenge is to John and the work group working with that team to come in under $100,000 to find out how to fund any excess over the $25,000 budget, and to get back to us and for us to say, okay, you've done your job, it's good, but right now the challenge is not to exceed this amount. Here's the challenge to get it down, and when you get it down and give the report to us, we can do the final approval online or just do the final approval, and it keeps things moving, but it keeps things moving with the idea in mind that we're watching this number like a hawk, which we should be, and trying to keep it as low as possible, which is our responsibility to do.
Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, I will ask my colleagues to consider appointing all of the, consideration for appointing all of the names listed on the appointment sheet up there. Any concern, any question? Anybody we have to point out or single out? All right, then I'll entertain a motion to accept the following appointments. Kenneth Wolf for first term for Environmental and Natural Assets, Diana Snyder, first term Communications, Patricia Seidel for first term Communications, Tim McBall, 3-year extension for Rec and Parks, Trez Denk, 3-year extension for Rec and Parks, and Gerald Horn, Chair of Marine Committee. I'll accept a motion to accept all those appointments.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the appointments as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All those are appointed. Next item on the agenda, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I will not ask for discussion. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
You did it.